Good afternoon, everyone. We are broadcasting to you live from sunny Davis, California. I just wanted to extend a big thank you to everyone who is joining us and taking time out of your schedules today to be here. This is the UC Davis Continuing and Professional Education Resiliency Planning Information Session. My name is Phil Wade, and I am the Marketing Editor for the Planning and Sustainability Program. I'll be your co-host throughout today's presentation, and I'm actually filling in for our Program Director, Monica Jackson, who unfortunately could not join us today. I'll be joined by my colleague, Hannah Moore, who is the Program Representative for our Land Use Planning and Resiliency courses.
Good morning, everybody, or afternoon.
And our silent but equal partner in this effort is Ruth, and she's helping us drive the bus, and we'll be taking your questions later on in the presentation. We're also very excited to be joined today by two of our program instructors, Brandy Bones and Lauren Nichols, both of whom work for ICF, and we'll be hearing from them a little bit later in the presentation today. And just one quick housekeeping item before we launch into the presentation. I wanted to remind all of you that by participating in today's information session, you will receive a one-time discount code for $100 off your next course with us. We'll be sending out those discount codes via email after today's session. So please keep your eyes peeled for that. So we know that you're all taking time out of your schedule. We don't want to take up your entire lunch hour, so we're going to try and keep this agenda pretty quick. We'll give you a quick rundown of who we are and our planning and sustainability program and what it's all about. We'll talk a little bit about resiliency planning and why we're offering this program, and then we'll hear from our instructors and open things up for a Q&A. But before we go any further, we would like to get to know a little bit about our attendees listening in today and just have a couple quick polls we'd appreciate your responses to. So the first question we have is, how many of you have taken a class from UC Davis Continuing and Professional Education, also known as UC Davis, or formerly known as UC Davis Extension? Okay, looks like we've got a mix with a few who haven't. So we really appreciate you taking time to be here and listen to what we have to tell you about resiliency. The next question we had is wanting to know where exactly or what field you're working in. Any local planners, people working in the state agencies, private sector? Okay, looks like a majority of you are working for local jurisdictions. That's great. So thank you for your responses. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Hannah, who's going to tell you a little bit about who we are and what our planning and sustainability program offers.
Now, a little bit about UC Davis Continuing and Professional Education. As our name implies, we provide high-quality continuing and professional education, which means that most of our students are usually already in the workforce. We focus on delivering programs and courses that help professionals develop, advance, or change their careers. Our courses are developed and taught by working professionals in their respective careers. At UC Davis Continuing and Professional Education, we have a long tradition of service, partnering with professional associations locally and nationally to create opportunities for our students. We serve students locally in the Sacramento region and all across the country who are looking to expand and develop professionally, or maybe looking to add a new skill set. Our planning and sustainability program is one of the largest of its kind in the Western US. We offer dozens of courses in a variety of subject areas that cater to professionals in a variety of fields. Basically, if you work in planning, environmental science, public administration, engineering, law, or somewhere in between, chances are we have courses that will meet your needs. As a part of our UC Davis Continuing Professional Education, we offer a land use and environmental planning certificate. It is a fully accredited and academically approved by UC Davis's Academic Senate, and each course meets the requirements for a graduate level course. It's designed for natural resource scientists and analysts, urban planners, resource management professionals, administrators, and analysts, as well as those in real estate, civil and environmental engineering, sustainability, landscape architecture, law, and public health. The certificate consists of 6 required courses and 8 elective courses. It is approximately $7,200 to complete the certificate, and there is a non-refundable $125 application fee. Each of those 6 required courses, or core courses, are offered once a year. And any course in land use and natural resources, conflict resolution, geographic information systems, and our new resiliency program can be used as an elective. We have recently started to offer an accelerated path for our certificate students. This option is only open to new students in the land use and environmental planning certificate who have not completed more than 1 required course. And if you're interested, it also applies to the graphic information systems professional concentration. The way to be a part of this is to work with your program manager, who is me, Hannah Moore, to create and commit to an academic plan that will help you complete your certificate in 3 years. The incentive to participate in the accelerated option is that we cover the cost of your last required course and your certificate application fee. In order to have the free required course, substitutions or deviations from the schedule will not be permitted. Please contact us directly and we'll be more than happy to get you started. And at the end of the presentation, we will provide our contact information. In addition to the one-time use $100 coupon that Phil mentioned, there are additional discounts available. If you're a member of the Cal Aggie Alumni Association, you can receive a $50 discount. We also have professional partners, which include the American Planning Association, the Association of Environmental Professionals, the Building Industry Association, and the Sacramento Regional Building Exchange Buildings Exchange, excuse me, that we all offer discounts with. There is also a group enrollment discount, which may be applicable if your organization is interested in enrolling multiple staff in the same course. In order to receive this discount, all enrollments must be processed at the same time and for the same course.
Thanks, Hannah. And we know that was a lot of information, so if you do have any follow-up questions about applying for any of our programs, please feel free to reach out to Hannah. So next, we just wanted to take a couple minutes to discuss generally the concept of resiliency. In basic terms, when we think of someone or something being resilient, we're referring to its capability to withstand or recover from a difficult situation. In a planning context, resiliency is the ability for a community or system to prepare for, respond to, and recover from a hazard or crisis. At its most basic, resilience in planning can be divided into 3 sort of general buckets. One is to take mitigative actions to prevent or reduce the risk of a crisis, like adopting resilient land use policies or practices, building design standards, and things like that. Next, there's preparation and response, which can entail a lot of different things, but generally involves understanding your community and knowing where your vulnerable populations are, developing a plan or strategy for when a crisis occurs, and working with stakeholders to ensure everyone knows what that plan is and what their role is in that plan. And then finally, there's recovery, which has both short-term and long-term objectives, such as getting key services and utilities back up and running. There's the cleanup effort and helping citizens rebuild. And of course, knowing how to work with both state and federal agencies, as well as the private sector during the recovery phase, is also very, very important. And obviously there's overlap between these points, but these are the 3 essential areas of concern to consider when thinking about resiliency planning. And I know this, it kind of can all sound sort of academic or theoretical, but the reality for us as Californians is that the need for resiliency planning is here. California has always experienced natural disasters, whether we're talking about earthquakes or floods or fires. These are issues that we've really had to deal with practically since our inception as a state. But in recent decades, we're beginning to see the rise of disasters, specifically wildfires. Last year, the Mendocino complex and Camp Fires combined to burn over 600,000 acres, claimed over 80 lives, destroyed more than 19,000 structures, and generated nearly $17 billion in insured losses. The year before that, the Thomas Fire ravaged California's central coast and resulted in severe flooding. and mudslide effects, and the counties of Santa Barbara and Ventura are still recovering from that. So in light of these facts, the need for us to holistically think about resiliency and how we plan, develop, and manage our communities has never been more acute. So that's kind of the thinking that went into the development of our new resiliency planning program, and why we've asked our experts like Brandy and Lauren to share their experience with you. Our goal is to provide you with the tools to address the issue of resiliency in your communities. Some of the topics we'll be covering in the first couple of quarters will include mitigated actions like the ones we talked about earlier, recovery plan development and implementation, and recovery funding. And we'll definitely be developing new courses that address other resiliency topics, and towards the end of our presentation, there will be an opportunity for all of you to weigh in on what those topics might be. And then finally, we've developed this program with a variety of parties in mind. Obviously, we've designed these courses with planners and leaders of local jurisdictions in mind, but they will also be useful to people who work in state agencies that might be involved in response and recovery. And then there's the private sector professionals who provide consulting services in the resiliency planning space who will also find these courses beneficial. But really, anyone that has a stake in seeing their community be prepared for the next crisis would stand to benefit from these classes. And with that, I'd like to hand the presentation over to our two guest speakers, Brandy Bones and Lauren Nichols. Brandy and Lauren, before getting into the specifics about the classes you're teaching this fall, could you just share with us a little bit about your background, where you work, and your experience in resiliency planning?
Hello, everyone. My name is Brandy Bones, and I work at ICF, management consulting firm with actually a large presence in California, where we do a lot of environmental work. I have spent my career in disaster recovery and resilience with a focus in particular in affordable housing and voluntary acquisition programs to move flood-prone properties out of harm's way, as well as focus on the full kind of spectrum of federal recovery and resiliency funding resources that are available to state and local governments, and helping those state and local governments maximize how they implement and think about and innovate around resiliency and recovery. And I've worked in a lot of places all over the country in support of those efforts.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Lauren Nichols. I also work with ICF. I recently joined ICF from the state of Louisiana. I worked for the state of Louisiana and for the state of New York as a government employee over the last 10 years, working on their disaster recovery and mitigation and resilience programs, kind of in the weeds on implementing them, working closely with local government officials and other state agencies in the community at large. So yeah, looking forward to participating in this program.
So I think here, myself and Lauren will kind of give an overview of what is going to be the first two courses of this Recovery and Resilience suite of planning courses. So I'm going to start with what will be the first course, which is just an overview of disaster recovery. You can find the course synopsis on the website, but what we are intending to do with this first course is really lay out the framework for the countries and California specifically, their approach to disaster recovery, particularly focusing over the past 10 years, where there's been a lot of evolution and actually an increase in the federal funding that's available in response to obviously the growing frequency and intensity of natural disasters. So in this course, you as a student will obtain a kind of broad overview and understanding of the disaster recovery life cycle, for all the way from preparedness, emergency preparedness, through response, recovery, and resilience and mitigation, the federal agencies involved, and the various approaches that California and other states and localities have taken to recovery, and how those tactics are evolving over time. We really intend here in this course to provide the larger context in which you as practitioners, either already working in this field or interested in understanding this field and or starting to work in this field, can be most effective in the delivery of these programs and efforts. It's a very complicated landscape. There's a lot of available funding sources. So we really want to provide kind of a plain English overview through this course, and will provide useful information that you can take back into your day-to-day jobs and understand how to be on top of the evolution of how states and local governments are trying to also bring innovation to the disaster recovery space. We'll also talk about how the federal government has evolved in its approach and is actually in some ways and particularly for some states, leading the way in prioritizing mitigation and resiliency so that federal recovery dollars are impactful and have long-term impacts, and think about prospective hazard risk as we are looking at more and more disasters, and those disasters are increasing in intensity. We'll also, as we will with all the courses, have group discussions and exercises that will allow you to apply what you're learning critically and constructively so you can identify efficiencies in what and how we can improve the current disaster recovery system in the United States.
All right, thanks, Brandy. And so in the second course, which is going to happen in November, we're going to be talking about recovery planning. So both pre and post disaster planning. Again, this course description is online, but just kind of as an overview, students are going to understand the distinct ways that California and other states and communities at various levels plan before and after a disaster. It's going to be a combination of lecture and then group discussion and workshops to cover the key elements of disaster recovery plans and to start to understand FEMA's National Disaster Recovery Framework, which really kind of serves as a foundation for planning at different stages across the US. And then also talking about different data sets that are usually used to inform the plans and engagement and coordination processes. So understandably, in the face of increased disasters, it's really important to have different plans in place, and there are different stages of recovery and preparedness and mitigation. And so we're going to kind of give an overview of different response plans, recovery and mitigation plans, and how they interface and how they make communities stronger. So they're critical to ensure that there's a continuity of operations immediately after a disaster, and then also importantly to effectively use the available resources that are available after a disaster and make sure those aren't kind of squandered or uncoordinated in the approach. So these plans can take, like I said, they can take many forms, and the requirements with each of the plans vary depending on their purpose and their audience. So we're not only going to talk about the various components that inform those plans, but also the information and engagement strategies and collaboration that all goes into creating and maintaining effective and current plans. And like I mentioned, there will be some collaboration with students within working groups to integrate the course materials and lessons into meaningful homework that you can take back to your community and think when you think about your community's existing plans and remaining planning needs.
And now we'll briefly go over, so those are the first two courses that we'll be offering October and November, and now we want to talk about the winter courses, which will actually take what you learn in the first two around kind of giving an overview and pre and post planning and disaster recovery to how do you actually effectively implement disaster recovery and resiliency programs. So the first one in January, can you hear us?
Did we lose you, Brandy?
I think we're here. Can you hear us now? I apologize.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I was starting to talk about the winter courses. Is that where we left off?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so after the first two courses in the fall, we're offering two courses in the winter where we're actually going to start drilling down into what it takes to effectively implement disaster and recovery and resilience programs, building on what you've learned in the fall. So the first, we'll talk about effective ways of leveraging and coordinating different funding programs. And the second one in March will focus on those programs that are federally funded, but are programs that are local, and that local and or state governments have some control and or input into designing and operationalizing. So we'll talk about combining and leveraging disaster recovery funding sources. And we also are very intentional in knowing for different students that you may be interested in one or another topic. So all of these courses also easily stand on their own. We'll provide an overview in each of them at the beginning so that you can kind of learn if you're more interested in kind of the implementation and operationalization, the planning. So that's kind of what we have in store as, and I think in some ways we're really looking big picture to tie together all of the disparate funding sources, ways of thinking about disaster recovery and resiliency, and bring it together through these courses so that you can be effective implementers and students of how to do better resilience going forward.
Great, thank you very much, Brandy and Lauren. And as we've heard, we already have some courses that are planned and scheduled, but we would like to ask you, our guests, what topics you would like to see covered in future classes. If you could just respond real quick to another poll, are there any other resiliency topics you would like to be seeing in future classes from us? You'll see a few different options there for topics. And if there's something not shown there, you can always reach out to us via the chat menu or contact us after the fact, and we will be happy to hear from you. Okay, so it looks like coastal hazards and wildfire, a couple of the big topics you would like to see us touch on in future classes. That's very helpful, thank you. So at this point, we'd now like to open up the presentation to your questions. If you have a question for one of our instructors about resiliency or the upcoming courses, please use the chat feature to submit your question now. Okay, well, while you guys are thinking about your questions, I'll tee one up for Brandy and Lauren. So Brandy and Lauren, what are some of the biggest hurdles you've experienced in working with communities in the resiliency space?
Hi, this is Lauren. So I think in my experience, one of the biggest challenges really revolves around coordination. And obvious as that sounds, I mean, coordinating across government agencies, across local and state government, and then also meaningfully incorporating feedback and information from the community at large has been a great challenge for governments and agencies across the country, really. With all these funding sources, there's really a great opportunity to break down silos that exist between the different professions and different government functions, industry and nonprofit and faith-based sector. And often in the wake of a disaster, some of these silos kind of get broken down as folks collaborate and come together to work toward the recovery. And there is sort of, oddly a magic of collaboration that happens in the wake of a disaster, but being able to kind of harness that and propel it forward through mitigation can be one of the bigger challenges and keep that momentum going.
Okay. And, if you could maybe give us the top 3 things that you think typically get overlooked but should be addressed by a community within the first, say, 24 hours of a disaster recovery mode?
Actually in the first 24 hours, the focus is really, on that's really where you have the response happening. You want to make sure everyone is safe and accounted for. And actually it's really about what is in place before a disaster even happens. So oftentimes, how well have you prepared for that disaster? And what tends to be overlooked is what was overlooked during the planning process leading up to that disaster. So, for example, you don't have a robust emergency response plan, continuity of operation plan that you have practiced and can activate when a disaster happens. Going to be where you're going to have some issues in the immediate aftermath of a disaster. I would say, in my opinion, our country does a really amazing job overall in emergency response and reacting to disasters in the first 24 hours when the right resources are mobilized. There's been, again, with increased frequency of disasters in recent years, there's been some issues with that because of being stretched of the workforce. But overall, we tend to do that better than we do kind of the long-term mitigation and resilience and long-term recovery. So part of also, I think, being able to respond in the immediate aftermath of a disaster is also how have you proactively accounted for the hazard risks that you're looking at, and how have you dealt with kind of protecting your built assets for the long-term hazard risks in your future. So I think there's a lot that goes into that, but I mean, the top three things, probably definitely focusing on the planning, activating resources, and then, you know, really planning for mitigation and resilience long-term.
I know that both of you have worked all over the country helping communities with their resiliency planning. You know, what are some of the unique challenges that you think California communities specifically might face when trying to plan for the next disaster, or just, you know, in general resiliency planning?
You know, in California specifically, there is, I think everyone who lives in California knows this, there's a lot of housing challenges, and in particular affordability of housing that needs to be accounted for. And oftentimes, you know, while disasters are terrible, they represent opportunities to make really smart investments with dollars that are not usually available to kind of deal with affordable housing issues head on. You know, in the courses that we'll talk about, the two large funding sources available in the face of a disaster event is going to be from FEMA and from HUD, and they focus a lot on housing, and there's a lot of innovative ways to deal with, you know, how communities can recover and actually deal with some issues that may have been in place before. But that's definitely a unique challenge to the California market. The other is, you know, every geography and region is different, and they're facing different hazards. California, of course, has landslides and droughts and wildfires, and very different types of disasters from what typically agencies in particular like FEMA are used to working with. So there's a lot of amazing science and innovative thinking in the space of the deal with wildfires and do mitigation and resilience long term. So some of the challenges but opportunities is also working with federal partners like FEMA to kind of read their thinking, or they're used to dealing for the most part with flooding events. How do you help them and work with them to kind of address wildfires and think about the risks associated with wildfires in a different way, so you can use funding in its highest and best use to deal with those hazards.
Yeah, I mean, with so many local planners on this call right now, I'm sure they're all kind of thinking about the unique challenges that their specific communities face. We haven't got any additional questions in at this time, but if for all you attendees listening in, you know, if you do think of anything else that you would like to know about or ask, please feel free to contact us, and we'll be providing our contact information here toward the end.
All right, so as a reminder, after hearing about the courses that Brandy and Lauren will be teaching, please remember that you can enroll in our fall courses now. We have the Disaster Recovery and Overview course starting on October 10th, and then the Recovery Planning Pre- and Post-Disaster will be taking place on November 20th. You can find them on our website under Sustainability and Planning, which is located at cpe.ucdavis.edu. For any additional questions or to receive more information about our resiliency program courses and the certificate, please contact us at our email, which is lunr@ucdavis.edu, or you can call 530-757-8878. If you'd like to reach me, Hannah, directly, as the program manager, you can always email me at hlmoore@ucdavis.edu, or give me a call at 530-752-8439. We'd like to thank you for attending the Resiliency Planning Information Session today and taking the time out to learn about our new program. And we look forward to seeing you in our upcoming classes.
And thank you for your time, Brandy and Lauren, for calling in. We really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you. Look forward to it.
Have a good day, everyone.